Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today it is time for another Overwatch League roster breakdown video, and today I will be talking about the Seoul Dynasty. They finished the season in the 11th overall spot in the regular season with a 12-12 record and a -7 map differential. However, they were the team that got second in the grand finals. Of course, the way that the playoffs worked, every team made the playoffs, and so the Seoul Dynasty went on a very big run in the APAC region, and then in the playoffs were victorious over the Philadelphia Fusion and the Shanghai Dragons to give themselves a spot in the grand finals, where they fell 4-2 to the San Francisco Shock. This is a team that is coming off a good season, all things considered, though it was not a great season. They made the grand finals, but the road to get there was very, very rocky and full of obstacles. So, has this team made changes, and are these changes going to be enough to get them to a potential second straight grand finals appearance? Let's talk about that. Let's start with the tank line, which I think is the most interesting part of this team. Last season, they had Marvel and Gesture and Michelle. Michelle almost never playing in the off-tank role. It was almost always Gesture and Marvel, with Gesture playing the Rhine or the Orisa, with Marvel on the Sigma, and sometimes even on the Diva, where he did not look very comfortable. Late in the season, they added 2U, of course, as a two-way player. Now, the tank line is no more Michelle, Marvel and Gesture both still on the team, and 2U as a full piece on this roster. And I think that this is a very good tank line. I think it's a move in the right direction. Whether or not 2U is the best off-tank out there, or if he is the player they should have signed, I don't even really care so much about that. I'm glad that this team made a push to sign a true off-tank, a player who is comfortable on the off-tank position. I really like Marvel as a player, and his Sigma is very good. He does not play Diva at a high level. He also does not play Zarya at a high level, or even Roadhog at a high level, really. He's a very good Reinhardt, and I think he's a better Reinhardt than even Gesture is. Gesture, of course, is better on the Winston, and I think this team will do a lot better if Marvel and Gesture have their roles on this team as main tanks, not as off tanks. And having a dedicated off tank like 2U gives this team a ton more stability at that off tank role, and I think it makes this team overall better. So I think that, to me, was the biggest complaint with the Seoul Dynasty last season. If the meta was not allowing them to have Marvel on the Sigma, they were bad. It wasn't they were mediocre. They were a bad team. But when it came to playoff performances and tournaments, this team tended to be very, very good, almost always finding victory in tournaments, going into deep runs. Obviously, they got second in the May Melee, almost beating the Shanghai Dragons. They're the only team last season to beat the Shanghai Dragons twice, and they beat the Shanghai Dragons in the regular season and well in the playoffs. So they are capable of hitting very high highs. It's just a matter of how often can they hit them. Can they be more consistent going into 2021 with a solid off tank, who I was impressed by when I watched him play. He played very well during the Next Cup, or the Nexus Cup, whatever it was called. He was a very high impact player, helped them a lot, and was a big piece for helping them kind of be one of the top teams in that tournament. They even beat the Shanghai Dragons one of the games. They didn't win the whole tournament. They lost to them again, but they did manage to find a victory. So I do like this kind of well-rounded tank line. You have two main tanks, which I think has been more successful in general than teams who run two off-tanks. You want to have a very solid piece on that off-tank role. You don't want to change that a lot. You need a very strong anchor there, and then you can kind of make changes with Marvel and Gesture depending on what you need, and that is what this Seoul Dynasty have, and I think that is going to be very good for them. So tank line, I think, should be one of the best in the league. I think they do have a very solid core there that will be a very useful piece for them going forward. And that is one of the things that I am most intrigued by for the Seoul Dynasty, is the hopeful consistency going forward for the tank line there for the Seoul Dynasty. Moving on to the support line for the Seoul Dynasty. At the flex support position, Creative is returning to this team. He is still the flex support. No more Badoshin. They only have Creative, and they are going full force with Creative going into 2021. I thought Creative was not as good earlier in the season. I thought Badoshin was very strong earlier in the season, but I thought in the playoffs and late in the season, Creative, when he did come in, had a much bigger impact than Badoshin. So I think that Creative is definitely the best move for this team, and definitely the player that they should have added, and the one they should have held on to. And I think he is 100% going to be a huge high-impact player for this Seoul Dynasty roster. And I think that that is a huge part of the success they found in the playoffs, was the switch from Badoshin to Creative. And I like seeing that. With Toby gone and a Slime gone, the question of main support was definitely one of the things I had on my mind. And I think they filled it pretty much the best possible way they could, adding Animo from the New York Excelsior. Now, you know, if you have been watching this long enough, that I am a huge fan of the NYXL. I'm a big fan of Animo. I think Animo is one of the better players. He does not die very often, like at all. And I think that Animo is a huge performer. He's not the flashy playmaker that you get from, say, like Lee Jae Gon or FD God, even Toby at times. But Animo is still a very good player, still a high-level player, still one of the top main supports in the league. And he lives, and that's kind of what you need. You need a main support who lives and keeps his teammates alive, and that is exactly what you get out of Animo. I don't know if I'd say this is an upgrade over Toby. I think it might be an upgrade. At worst, it's like a horizontal move. You're not getting worse at main support by going from Toby to Animo. I think you're getting more consistent play, and you're getting a different type of play style. Animo is not going to be making the same kind of high-impact, flashy plays that we saw from Toby. But he doesn't need to, because he's going to keep this team alive, and he's going to be putting more resources into allowing Gesture or Marvel to succeed more than I think Toby did. I think that is going to be where Animo does a better job for the Seoul Dynasty team in enabling those players, and potentially even helping be better at enabling Prophet to make plays or Fitz to make plays on the DPS line. And that, to me, is a huge part of why Animo is a huge signing for this team, is that he provides way more kind of support for your playmakers instead of being a playmaker himself. And I think that is a very useful piece for the Seoul Dynasty roster that will change the way they play a little bit. But I think that was one of the things that we saw with this team. Badoshin wants to be a playmaker. Toby is very good, but at times wants to be a playmaker. I don't get that same feeling from Creative and Animo. They are very much the type of support players who are going to be supporting the stars of this team, which are Gesture and Marvel and Prophet, and they're going to enable those players to be the carry players, to be the players that have these big moments, because it's the way that they win, is by allowing those players to be the stars of the show and not taking it for themselves, which I think is very good. I think down the stretch last season, you look at the Shanghai Dragons, for example, I think Lee Jae-gon is an incredible main support, and he's arguably the best in the league. I think hands down he's the best Korean main support in the league. But one of the things I think is interesting about when you look at a lot of these teams in the league, I think that one of the things that is a problem that the Shanghai Dragons faced in the playoffs last season was Lee Jae-gon was getting caught out for his aggression. The Shock were just punishing him for every overly aggressive play that he made. He tried to make a play, he got shut down, and the Dynasty or the Dragons were going down 6-5 in a lot of fights. You need main supports that are going to stay alive, that are going to keep your team alive, and that are going to provide more resources into the people who you need to be allowing and enabling to make plays. Animo knows his position very well. Animo knows when he needs to be a playmaker and when he needs to take a backseat and enable the playmakers. And Creative is the same way. They have shown that ability, especially last season for Creative, and Animo for his time with the NYXL for 3 years or 2.5, whatever you want to say for him. So it's a very, very, very good signing, in my opinion. And, of course, when you get to the DPS, you see that they bring with him also a big name in Sabiobi. So there are certainly some things to take away from this signing of Animo that I think really show how they want to kind of solidify this team more. They were very up and down last season. They lacked a ton of consistency in the way they played. And I think that the addition of Anima will really kind of focus this team. He has a role. He has a position. He has something that he does very well. There is no question anymore, in my eyes, that you have a very strong player in Animo who is going to play at a high level with consistency, and he's going to show up, and he's going to be somebody who provides a more stable environment for this team, which will help them find that more consistent play that we saw from them throughout kind of the later half of the season in the playoffs, where they looked very good. I think we'll see him looking a lot better now on this team, and he'll be able to enable this team to perform at a higher level. Finally, let's move on to the DPS, where there are 3 DPS players, though there have been some small rumors that they may be adding a 3rd DPS player. It was just that or a 4th DPS player. I think it was like a player manager, the general manager for the team, followed Libero on Twitter, so they might sign Libero. I'm not expecting it. A follow on Twitter doesn't necessarily mean anything. When you have Sabiobi and you have Animo on the team, like you could just be wanting to talk to the guy, you could be wanting to DM him, who knows what it could be. There's a whole bunch of things it could be. I digress, though. This DPS line is definitely one of the biggest parts of this team, and of course the star for that is Prophet, who is the number 1 candidate for the greatest Overwatch player of all time. I don't think we're at a point yet where we can say that Prophet is definitively the GOAT of Overwatch, but he is a very, very good player. You don't need me to explain to you why. Incredible flexibility, one of the best tracers in the league, and he just looks like he can play any hero that you put him on. There was the narrative that he couldn't play Echo, and he has destroyed that narrative. He has looked great on Echo. He looked very good on Echo in the next cup, so we're talking about an incredible player here who you're going to put next to him players that are also very good. You have the returning player of Fitz, who I thought his play last season was very impressive. He impressed me. His Widowmaker is really good and really underrated for how good it is. And so I really do like what Fitz provides for this team. And I think that he is a perfect player to combo with Prophet. You have Sabiobi as well, which I think is interesting. I feel like Sabiobi's main spot on this team is primarily going to be Tracer whenever Prophet can't play Tracer. So if they're in a Tracer Genji meta or something like that, that's the only time I really see SBB coming out. Maybe also for the McCree. I don't think Fitz has a bad McCree, but he has other heroes that I think are better. I really like last season. Obviously, NYXL fan, so I watch a lot of Sabiobi. He really impressed me the most when he was on his McCree. I was not crazy about his Tracer most of last season. I just thought his playstyle isn't as good as what it was back in 2018. I don't think he played a ton of Sombra last season, but when he played it in 2019, I wasn't super impressed with it. So it's really his Ashe was okay, but his McCree was pretty good. So I think that's really the only times he really will play, are if they need a McCree or if they need a Tracer when Prophet can't play Tracer. But I expect it to mostly be Prophet and Fitz. Even if they had Libero, I'd still expect it to be mostly Prophet and Fitz. I think those two just play well together. They have the synergy from last season, so you don't really want to break that. So that to me is really what I'm looking at with this team, is how will they perform with these DPS players in the lineup when overall they've been successful in the past. Obviously, this team made the grand finals last year, and I don't think people expected that from them. So it is a very strong roster with some good DPS players. It's just a matter of, can this roster be more consistent after the performance they had last season, where they were very up and down. They'd have a good week, they'd have a bad week, and it was very difficult to really pin where this team was. I don't think that'll be as much of a problem. They looked very good in the next cup. They did lose to the Dallas Fuel, which was a bit of a surprise, but the Dallas Fuel are not a bad team by any means. So, eventually you kind of would expect to win a game in a situation like that. So I am looking out for the Seoul Dynasty. They're the team I'm kind of keeping my eyes on the most. They beat Shanghai, they beat Guangzhou, they lost to Dallas, then they lost to Shanghai again in the finals for the next cup. So I'd expect them to still be that kind of team that's chasing Shanghai right now. Who knows how they're going to compare to the likes of the Fusion. We haven't seen the NYXL really play yet, though some stuff that we've seen from them have looked pretty good. I'd like to see some more games obviously come and go, and then we can kind of get another idea for what's going on. But I think overall, what we have with the Seoul Dynasty is a pretty good team. They've looked pretty good. They looked pretty solid. I don't know if they are a title contender right off the gate. I need to see what happens with 2U being integrated more into the roster and how much Animo provides for the team. But ultimately, I do think this is one of the teams to watch for in APAC. I think they're going to be one of the top teams in APAC. And I think that thinking otherwise or assuming otherwise is pretty silly at this point in time, because everything we've seen from Profit and Gesture in their playoff run and their time together in the Overwatch League has been pretty successful. So those are my thoughts on the Seoul Dynasty. Let me know your own thoughts on the team in the comments down below. If you agree, disagree, I would love to hear from you. But that is all from me for today. If you enjoyed this content and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. But that is all. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.